My name is Kim. I'm working as a DevOps engineer in Provectus. I came from Armenia, and today I will talk about Azure, and I will talk about some key services which are critical in modern cloud computing systems. And let's start with what is Azure. And here, in simple words, Azure is a modern Microsoft's cloud computing tool, which provides a lot of tools for developers, for businesses to manage, create, deploy their applications in cloud computing system. It provides a lot of cool services for developers, such as virtual machines, storages, SQL servers, to manage everything in the cloud. And let's start with the Azure hierarchy. And we can see here it contains 4 layers. First of all is the management groups. Management groups are for accesses, policies, and compliance for subscriptions. The second layer is the subscriptions. They are a logical container of the resources, which provide the way to manage the accesses and manage the cost of the resources. The third layer you can see is the resource group. The resource group is again the logical container for the application, which contains several services from the Azure. And the latest layer is the actual resources. It's SQL servers, storage accounts, virtual machines. And here you may ask why we need actually the resource groups when we have a subscriptions. And I hear a lot when people ask why we need it and why it's mandatory to provision if you don't, you have a subscription. But subscription is managing a cost in the core level. And for example, if you have an application, you can split in the small parts and start manage their accesses to the specific parts. For example, you may have application, some small applications, yeah, and your engineer need to have a read-only access to all of them, and just one of them he needs some contributor access, and it's way easier to use this resource group for it. And there's another key factor of the resource groups are monitoring. It's really easy when you have resources in the single resource group, and it's easier to monitor them. This about the resource group, and let's deep dive to Azure. And today we will split our meetup to a presentation on two parts. We will talk about the Azure for enterprises, then we will talk about Azure for developers, for engineers, and then at the end we will just unite them in a single unit. Okay, and let's start with the Azure for enterprises. Azure offers for enterprise application the scalability. You can scale up your services, scale up and down however you need. They provide a lot of tools, cool tools for security. It provides a way for hybrid cloud to connect for your on-premise instances to Azure services and use together. It provides data analytics, DevOps, and here what I would like to mention, and one of the key factors is the cost savings. It provides you pay-as-you-go model, so you need to pay only for what you used for. And another key factor here is the regional availability. Azure has the most of the regions available worldwide. It's over 60 regions worldwide, and that regions makes low latency access to the data, and a lot of enterprises are choosing this for regional availability because they keep their data locally, because it has a lot of regions available. Another key factor why Azure enterprises are choosing Azure, it's Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is the access management tool, so you can just connect with a single set of credentials to all of the resources and start to use that services provided by Azure. It has SSO, MFA, it can be integrated with various systems, and luckily this Azure ID is used by most of the enterprises. It has application, group management, identity protection. About the Azure Active Directory, we can talk a day because it provides a lot of cool services. But today we will just skip it, and with understanding that this is one of the best tools that Azure provided. And we will talk about some part for our access management is managed identities and service principals. Okay, what people usually are using them as a same service. For example, if you need to configure access to between the services, they are using the service principal, but actually they are using managed identity or the different one. So managed identities, let's start with managed identities. There are built-in services from Azure. So you need to provision it, create that service from Azure. But the service principal you are creating, and it's a feature, some feature of the Azure Active Directory. The second one is the accesses. So when you need to give access to from some service to another one, you can use directly in Azure this managed identity. But when you are trying to give the access to with service principals, you must need to create an application in Azure Active Directory, then grant that application access to some specific resource. The third point is the managed identities are specific for services, and they are automatically managed by Azure. What does it mean? That you don't need to provide some credential. It automatically will get that credential and will connect to the service. But for service principals, you need to provision and configure it manually, then give the credentials and connect using that credentials. And the fourth difference that you can see, managed identities are designed for more secure ways because this you don't need to provide any credentials, and just using this service it can connect between them. But service principals are used, like to say, commonly because it's using this credential from third-party tools. For example, you cannot use these managed identities outside from the Azure and grant the accesses between them. And here you can see the use cases are different for them. So if you have a third-party tool that you need to connect to some of the Azure service, you need to connect with service principal, or you are trying to connect from the CLI. But if you are giving the accesses between the services in the Azure, the managed identity is the best solution for it. That's about this Azure for enterprises, and let's talk about the Azure for engineers. Here we can see what Azure provides for engineers. It's a wide range of programming languages, starting from the C# ending with the JavaScript. It has the integration development environment. It provides it like Visual Studio Code. It has PaaS, like Azure Web Service, so you cannot think about the service or the infrastructure, what is running under your environment. Another thing is, of course, is the serverless computing, which you don't need to worry about the servers or anything. It provides a cool features for containers. It has a lot of cool integration API to connect to the services. And of course, good tools like Azure DevOps, which is really, really cool, and it can do anything you want with connection to Azure services. But today we will talk about just for a few of them, and let's start with the Azure function. Azure function is the event-driven system in Azure for hosting and developing your code. It provides you security, scalability, you can see with the processing, hybrid connectivity. But here today we will talk the advantages and the key factors of the Azure functions. It's about the security. It can be integrated with the Key Vault service Azure, where you can keep your secrets, keys, the data which you don't need to keep in the code. So with keeping the code there, Azure function can connect to it and then get the credentials and connect to any service that you want. Another factor is the language support. It supports a lot of languages like .NET, Node.js, PowerShell, Python, a lot of language support it has. And the main key factor here is hybrid connectivity. So you can trigger this function up, you can connect to it with some services, or it provides you external and internal URL, and you don't need to worry about to create a load balancer or some other services to connect from outside your infrastructure. It provides you an external and internal URLs, and you can just trigger from wherever you want. And of course, it is really easy to use this one, and here you can see you can just push the code there with some CI tools. Maybe you can just copy paste there, and even you can start to use it from there. The interface is really easy, and it can be really fast to deploy the code here. The next one I want to talk about is Azure SQL. Azure SQL is the service for relation databases provided by Azure. It's one of the best tools again from Azure. It is also the secure. It is scalable. It can be integrated with various systems, starting from Azure Active Directory for security, ending with some data analytics tools where you can keep your data there. It's cost effective if you compare with other cloud computing services, and you will find that Azure SQL is one of the cheaper provides relation database services, because you don't need to worry about the certification, the price for it, and it's not included there. And the most important part here is the high availability. Azure provides a cool failover advantages for high availability. So you can see the automated backups. It's mandatory in Azure, and you can backup in for 7 days or for 35 days, however you want. The coolest part here is point-in-time restore. You may ask, all the SQL servers provided from all other cloud computing services has this point-in-time restore, but the coolest part here is in Azure, you can restore your database in the same server and with the new server. So with you are restoring it into the new server, so you need to change the connection strings, or you are restoring it for just getting data there. But if you have some issues there, you can easily restore in the same database without worrying connection of your application to database. Another key factor is the long-term retention. You can keep your backups for 10 years, more than 10 years. It has a cool option backup to URLs. You can backup your database to storage accounts, or you can provide for your on-premise URL and just backup there. And another key factor is the geo-restore. You can easily restore in any other region you want, in available regions, if you will have some failure in the geolocation where Azure SQL is hosted. This is about the Azure, and let's talk about the storage account. A storage account provides storages for application, for any kind of data, and it provides 4 types of storage: blob storage, table storage, queue storage, and how it was, file storage, of course. So if you have any unstructured data and you don't need to think about where to keep the data there, and here will help you develop storage. Of course, if you have a tables or queues, it provides a lot of cool tools, and the best one is the tiers. You can use the standard tier or premium storage tiers. It provides the same way, it's secure, scalable, it can be integrated with various systems, it's flexible, but the most coolest part here is the high availability. Azure Storage Account provides three types of availability. One is the just standard storage account, another one is zone redundant storage account. With just it's really cheaper, and with some addition to the price, you can have the zone redundant storage account, and you don't need to worry about if something will happen to your storage in that zone. And with more pricing, you will get your redundant storage. Of course, it's not available in all regions, but you can get it, and if you have a data that it should be available 99 and 99%, so you must use the geo-redundant storage provided from Azure. And the next one, yeah, we can talk about the Azure AKS, the Kubernetes service provided from Azure. And it's, again, you can see it's scalable, flexible, it can be integrated with various systems. It's really, really easy to manage this Kubernetes service. You can do from CLI, you can do it directly from portal. It provides all the information there. But the coolest part here is Azure provides you two ways of Kubernetes service. First of all is the private one, another the public one. So if you need to keep all your data connection, everything privately, you can use the private Kubernetes service. If you don't mind that you need to connect from other resources from internet, and you can just connect, deploy this service with public option and connect to it. Another key factor here is the automatic updates. You don't need to worry about to update it manually, and if the new version of Kubernetes service is released, that in Azure it will be available for a few days after it, and you don't need to wait a year or half a year to when it will be available, and then you will update it with the new features which Kubernetes service provides. And of course the built-in security. Here we can you can see it's not only airbag security is available for Azure, but also it can connect to Azure Active Directory, and it can be controlled from Azure Active Directory, just getting the token from AD and connect to Kubernetes service. And this makes Azure Kubernetes service really, really important in modern cloud computing services. And of course, the next one is the application insights. So when we have a application deployed in Azure, we need to look somewhere to understand what the issues we can have. And here is the best tool that we can see without worrying about the third-party tools. It's application insights. It gives you a cool APM, it gives you detailed analytics, it gives you it can be integrated with your IDE like Visual Studio or any other tool. It has a cool intelligent alerts which will automatically Azure will suggest you to set up there. And it's really, really easy to set up. With just a few clicks to next, you will get all information about your application, the connections, the issues, everything that you need. And let's unite what we talked about. Here we can see just a simple architecture diagram where our code is hosted in Kubernetes service or in Azure Functions, and Kubernetes service connecting to all the other services using the managed identities, because here we don't have any third-party tool for connection. The GitHub here is only for deploying code to the Azure Function and Kubernetes service. The external users can connect from the application gateway, which is the 7th layer of load balancer. And here we can see a lot of connections to Azure Function. It's shown that Azure Function can be triggered from externally, can be triggered internally, and it can keep and get the code from the key vault, the secure data, and everything here, it can be monitored in a single resource group with application insights. Of course, you can integrate there all other resource group you have, and you can monitor it. And everything here is controlled from a single service. It's Azure Active Directory, and it can be controlled from an infrastructure team, and they connect to all the services here and manage them. And of course, all cloud providers, the same Azure has a pros and cons. From the pros, from the services, we have seen that it is scalable, it is good, it has a good integration and can be integrated with various tools. It's secure, it makes a high availability. And of course, the main factor, it's really cheaper, it's cost effective. But of course, it has also some costs there. It's complexity. Some of the Azure services are really complex, and you need to troubleshoot, you need to work, you need to learn. Of course, Azure has some learning curve for their so applications, enterprises, businesses need to invest to their IT team and start learning in order to use that complex services. And the one which I really don't like here is the Azure support one. It's really it's not cheaper, and you need to pay additional money to get good support, and it's not always like that. And that's all today. If you have any question, please welcome.
My name is Konstantin. Almost everything, or maybe completely everything that I heard from your presentation is existing in other clouds like AWS and GCP. So my question, what is the main benefit, Azure benefit, which I should think about when I try to choose between these clouds?
So that's why I talked about some services, and I have mentioned there the key benefits. For example, for SQL service, it's high availability, that it's pricing, it's really cheaper. For example, for Azure Functions, it's the connectivity, the integration is really cool. For example, if you will get the AWS service, is the Lambda service, but in Azure, the codes, you can work with more code languages. In Azure, the second factor is in Azure you can keep the data. If you have some connection string, some password there, you can keep it in a key vault. And with, for example, the developer, which is deploying the code, and you don't need to have the access to the backend service side SQL server. You can just update the code there, and that's all. It automatically get, and you will not keep your secure data in the plain text like in other cloud computing services. And the main factor in, for example, in Azure Functions, it was the connectivity. You can integrate it with various systems. It's and the connection from externally. It's really cool when you are using some external tools to trigger your function apps and make some file processing or code processing. And that's all I think for these two services.
So I think AWS also have all these functions. And
AWS for Lambda provide external URL just a few months ago. last year.
Yes, yeah. You could use something like API gateway and everything will work.
Yeah, but here you don't need to worry about the API gateway or anything. It's automatically is providing that.
I'm talking about Azure DevOps. It's most attractive and wonderful tool for CI.
Yeah.
It's fully compatible with GitHub Actions and provides some additional layer of isolation for environments and so on. So I worked with it previously, and it was a great experience. So.
Yeah.
Я сейчас немного не знаю, мне надо на русском вопрос задавать или по-английски также?
Как удобно.
Всем все равно. Это вопрос к тебе, но это вопрос в том числе в зал. Я думаю, у некоторых он тоже есть. Это касается любого клауда, но сейчас про Azure. Вот я неплохо разбираюсь в AWS. Я зашел в Azure, вот эти subscription, ресурс-группы, страшно непонятно. Хочется разобраться в Azure с позиции, окей, я знаю AWS и GCP, покажите мне, вот, что тут то же самое, что тут разное. Ты когда-нибудь или кто-нибудь в зале натыкались на ресурсы, которые объясняют, допустим, вот core, там, главные принципы Azure и его вот отличия для людей, для девопсов, которые уже шарят за клауда?
Ну, смотри, в документации есть там много-много чего, что написано, как использоваться, как понять все это. Но если как бы посмотреть, ты зашел в Azure, да, там, что тебе видно, тебе дали access, как бы есть первое это subscriptions, да, и ты как бы начинаешь с subscriptions, и там все понятнее станет. Тебе просто надо одну ресурс просто там добавить, и там будет все видно, как вся эта иерархия идет, да, и когда как бы тебе надо уже давать как-то access дать или какому-либо сервису, и уже ты начинаешь работать с этими менеджмент-группами, которые и опять становится очень-очень легче. Там ты заходишь в Active Directory, смотришь, откуда все начинается, и этот path там постепенно идет, и все понятнее станет. Вот так.
Ну, то есть предлагаешь типа начать работу, а там сам разберешься.
Да, просто самый проще вариант, просто там добавить ресурс, и все начнет. Там и все понятно будет.
Хорошо, спасибо.